Hi there, folks who are joining. Feel free to write in the chat where you're from, what organization you work for, and what you're looking for in this webinar. And we will start in maybe about 2 minutes, just give people a little more time to roll in. Hi, Debbie. Hi, Tati. Nice to have you here. Hi, Terry. Hey, Kristen, I know you. Good to see you too. Hi, Susan, Teresa. All right, I'm seeing a bit of a critical mass here. So I am so excited to moderate this stellar panel. Just so all of you know, my name is Amanda Kean, and I'm the Director of Consulting at The Giving Block. For those who don't know, The Giving Block is a Shift4 company, and we're the leading platform helping nonprofits fundraise more effectively from modern philanthropists. Pioneers of crypto philanthropy movement, the Giving Block developed solutions for cryptocurrency donations, making crypto and NFT donations mainstream in the nonprofit sector. I was actually a client before joining the team, so I can attest to this myself. Our team developed afterwards a stock giving and DAC giving experience to empower even more donors to give. So when combined, the Giving Block's product suite empowers more donors than ever to give assets to their favorite causes. Before we begin, to all folks, all nonprofits who are present, I just wanted to let you know about our limited time offer to receive a $500 Bitcoin donation when you sign up with the Giving Block. So to get started or learn more info, just visit our website and book a demo with our team. They'll walk you through how to enable your nonprofit to accept crypto, stocks, and DAFs. Just as some housekeeping, this webinar is being recorded and you'll receive an email with a copy of the recording and additional resources from our panelists after. And as a reminder, just use the Q&A for questions so we can answer them at the end, just an easier place for me to keep track. I just saw our team plopped out a link in the chat for booking a meeting with us. All right, now let's get into the meat and potatoes. I'm so excited to bring you this expert-led panel that is going to explore how nonprofits can leverage data analytics to drive decision-making, optimize strategies, and maximize impact. Now let's go ahead and meet our panelists. Blake, let's start with you. Can you introduce yourself and what your company does?
Hi all, thanks for being here. I'm Blake Arata. I am the Director of Digital at Community Boost Consulting. So Community Boost is a digital marketing agency that specifically specializes in supporting nonprofits and social ventures. Over the last 8 years or so, I've had really the privilege of helping to develop and refine many of the digital strategies that we utilize for our nonprofit partners to empower them, including a very comprehensive analytics and tracking process. So I'm just really excited to be here. I'm really excited to share some insights and experiences with you all today. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Blake. Lauren, do you want to introduce yourself?
I would love to. Thanks, Amanda. Hello, my name is Lauren Vanderpool. It's great to be here with all of you today. I am a co-founder of Social Impact Solutions, and our team helps nonprofits measure and market their impact. So we help some of our clients actually capture impact data, and then our clients that already have data, we help them turn that into marketing and communication collateral to communicate back to funders, volunteers, and other stakeholders as well. So it's great to be here with you all today, and I'm really looking forward to today's panel.
John?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is John Samus. I'm a Senior Vice President with CCS Fundraising. I'm in charge of our data analytics team, but CCS Fundraising is about 550 strong consultants, I think is we have about right now. We basically do all kinds of different fundraising consulting, from feasibility studies to campaign management to interim management, but also we do a lot of analytics work too. So predictive modeling, opportunity analysis, projections, those kinds of things is what my team typically focuses on.
Great. And Kristen?
Hi, Kristen Priest with the Allegiance Group Pursuant. We're a full service fundraising agency. I work as Vice President of Client Strategy, working on the analytics, insight, and experience team focused on mid and major giving. And part of my work in that role is to study data and look for what I like to call the narrative behind the numbers, or the voice of the donor, to allow the data to be the storyteller, or at least the story informer.
I love that. You all are incredibly impressive, and excited to moderate this panel today. I can't wait to learn some insights. So to jumpstart, as a starter question for all of our panelists, for any nonprofits that are just getting started in their data journey, what is the first thing they should know about how to start integrating data analytics into their everyday operations? Okay, our recording's back. Who wants to take this this first question?
I'm happy to kind of kick off with like just a basic answer here. Yeah, I mean, I think for any nonprofit that's just getting started with integrating data analytics into their everyday operations, I think it's first and foremost, it's really important to set really clear, measurable goals. You know, you have to begin by identifying both what you want to achieve, as well as what are those key metrics that are going to help you get to those goals and achieve those goals. So if whether that goal is acquiring new donors or improving program registrations or even increasing followers via your social channels, having those specific objectives really help guide your data collection and your analysis efforts.
Great.
Yeah, I'll kind of build on what Blake said. I think that was my first thought, is to approach it from a strategic perspective. What do I need to know or accomplish, versus just all of this really cool data that I might be able to get my hands on. And I think that puts us in a spot where it's analysis paralysis, or pick your phrasing, but we end up with a lot of really interesting data versus actionable data. And so I think just starting with that, walk, jog, run, what do we need to know? What do we want to accomplish? And maybe that is, we just need to know our reality. But having that goal, having that strategy, and then letting data support and inform that.
That's a great phrase. So did you say it was interesting versus actionable?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's everything that Blake and Kristen have said is definitely a talking point. We could probably talk about that this whole webinar, just making sure that goals and objectives and KPIs are all clear, measurable, across all programs and departments within your organization. I would also emphasize, you know, lots of organizations want to focus on donor data for obvious reasons, and that's incredibly important. Marketing analytics, also incredibly important, but just don't shy away from or forget about your programmatic data, because that's really what your donors and stakeholders are wanting to hear about anyways. So make sure that you're getting enough feedback and even measuring true impact change over time from your beneficiaries, the people that you serve, so that you can really emphasize your programmatic data to your donors. And the last thing I would say is, if your team is feeling overwhelmed, if you're getting a lot of pushback from certain individuals or certain departments, it's okay to start small. Just start somewhere and then grow as you can. So those would be my tips to your question, Amanda.
Great.
Lauren, you stole my thunder. That was exactly what I was going to say. I think sometimes a lot of clients that I interact with, we don't have a good data, we don't have enough data, we're not even sure about what our data, how it was actually entered 5 years ago. You could think about that for the rest of your career. Just start doing something, figure out your goals, start doing something, and then of course get better at bringing your data in, managing your data, cultivating your data, stewarding your data, right? That's important, but you have to start somewhere. And if those reports don't look good because your data aren't good, then don't look at those and look at some other ones. I love interesting versus actionable as well, Kristen. I think both are kind of helpful. Interesting provides context, but actionable is like, now what do I do with this stuff, right? So.
Great, everyone. Yeah, I'm definitely hearing some themes in here, especially how data can really tell a story. And I think that's something that we all will hit on later. Um, but Lauren, actually, just to expand on that, I know that in your role at Social Impact Solutions, you work with nonprofits to help them provide clear and insightful impact metrics. So, what are the best practices for communicating data insights to stakeholders in a compelling way?
I think a couple of things that I would prioritize just in the short time that I have to speak on this question would be theory of change, logic model, and impact reports are two things that we like to use regularly as communication tools. So if you have not used a theory of change logic model, this is a tool that can be incredibly helpful for your internal team. So getting your marketing, development, and operations teams on the same page. Looking at inputs and determining, what do we actually need as a nonprofit to get a new program off the ground, or what's required to keep a program up and running day to day, week to week. And then moving from inputs to outputs, you can look at how many people you're serving. If you're a nutrition nonprofit, how many meals are you distributing? If you're an education nonprofit, how many school supplies are you distributing? What we see a lot of is that a lot of our organizations that we work with stop with outputs. And so really they're telling donors that we serve X number of people, we distribute X number of supplies, and that's fantastic. We like to encourage you to look at a theory of change logic model and go to the next step and start to look at outcomes, short-term and mid-term outcomes. So what change are your programs actually creating in the lives of the people that you serve? And then even if you're projecting long-term outcomes, if you can measure that already, great. If not, go ahead and project 3, 5, 10-year outcomes. And again, this theory of change can be a great communication tool internally. You can also report this to your donors and say, hey, look, here's where we need help on the front end. Here's what our programs are doing. And in the long term, these are our goals. And here's how you as a donor or a volunteer or some other stakeholder can help us get there. So a theory of change is a great tool to help all parties get on board, work towards the same goals and objectives. And then once you have that information, turning it into an impact report, whether that's a PDF or a really nicely designed infographic, you can even turn your impact report into a video and have it as a really engaging way for donors and other stakeholders to learn more about your programmatic impact, the change that you're making. Put that on your website, put snippets of your impact report on social media and use it as a marketing and communication tool.
I love that. I know, especially for institutional donors, especially for large foundations, having those large long-term, short-term impacts and outcomes are really important. And theory of change is definitely a phrase that I have heard, especially during my grant writing career. All right,
Absolutely.
pivot a little bit. Blake, from your experience as director of digital, how have you found that nonprofits can utilize their data to shape their digital strategy? Is there any data that nonprofits are able to extract from their digital work?
Yeah, just not even as director of digital, but just being in digital marketing in general, I found that nonprofits, they have to be leveraging their data to shape and refine their digital strategies. I feel like if they're not measuring and considering data in those decisions that they're making, those strategies are merely guesses at best. And so I think one of the key areas where data is invaluable in understanding donors, and where data is invaluable is in understanding donor and supporter journeys. So it's really helpful to be able to collect and analyze that kind of data to help nonprofit marketers better understand a lot of different pieces, like what kind of content is resonating best with those potential donors, what calls to actions are the most effective, where there may be drop-offs or points of friction in the engagement process. And so, yeah, there's a lot of places where nonprofit marketers or nonprofits in general could be extracting that kind of data from their day-to-day digital activities. I think the biggest ones for me, it's in their website analytics. So tools like Google Analytics can provide a ton of really helpful information around, those visitors that are coming to your site. Information like demographic information, behavioral information, conversion rates of all the different pages across your site, it really allows you to put yourself in the shoes of your donor and understand those strengths and weaknesses of that donor journey. I think two other pretty common places, but sometimes are underutilized, are email campaign metrics. Most nonprofits that I talk to are using email in some capacity. And so being able to look at open rates, click-through rates, conversion rates from those email campaigns can really help reveal what type of messaging and timing works best for your audience. And I find that those kinds of learnings can actually be applied to a lot of different channels, whether that's cost per click or PPC or social media campaigns or others. And then lastly, social media insights platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram give you a lot of very detailed information around demographic info, follower growth, post engagement data. All of those things also help you kind of tailor your content strategy. So those are just some small examples, but that should get a lot of the people on this call on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really insightful. So just to pivot a little bit and tell a story, Kristen, in particular with your experience around major giving and campaigns, could you share a case study or an example where data analytics significantly boosted a nonprofit's impact?
Yeah. So those of us that might have gone through the fundraising school or fundraising training, we all kind of heard about the 6 rights of fundraising. Having the right person, ask the right prospect for the right amount, for the right project at the right time in the right way. And that's what we talk about when we talk about the art of fundraising, especially when it comes to major giving. I think data, the science of fundraising, is what really allows us to jumpstart that art, that relationship building. And so with one organization in particular, it was a regional animal rescue organization. They had a fairly anemic major gifts program. They really needed to boost the number of major donors. So with that as the goal, we looked first at the mid-level. This really started as a mid-level program initiative. And so we took that large subset, looked at the data, for those with capacity and affinity indicators. We looked a little bit deeper though. So beyond the basic net worth indicators, we looked at things like predicted discretionary spend and demographic, what their family situation looked like. And the case study I give is you look at my brother and I. We're similar age, both married, similar combined household income. My husband and I have no children. My brother has 5 children under 18. So our spending and financial planning for the next 5-10 years looks very, very different. Predicted discretionary spend can be a really important indicator around what that might look like and what those differences might be. So using that to help us best understand how they might want to give. And then affinity indicators, why they support you specifically. Not the case for support, but where their case for supporting you looks like. And that helped us through looking at survey responses. They'd done silly things like, do dogs drool and cats rule? Understanding, do they want to be served up images of sweet little kittens or the 3-legged dog? Or was it the wildlife rescue work that they did? Those are very different motivators, tugs at very different heartstrings. Also looked at behavior data. What videos were they watching to completion? What content were they really responding to? What emails were they engaging most with? And with that, we were able to serve them up messages that better responded and connected with them at a more core level. We were able to have more meaningful conversations more quickly. The long and short of that is within this universe, we received in less than 5 months, 2 6-figure gifts from donors who had previously not given more than $5,000. And within that overall universe, we saw a lift in 18 months of about 150% in giving.
That's huge and really impactful. John, within CCS's data analytics practice, I know you help nonprofits produce models and use results to achieve their fundraising goals. From this experience, what common challenges do nonprofits face when analyzing data, and how could they overcome them?
Yes, those are a lot of different things that I thought about with this question. One, so Kristen, we do a lot of the same stuff. You know, I go back to my initial comment earlier, which is you got to start somewhere, because a common response we get to clients. So my team typically will do those affinity scoring models that Kristen was, I think, kind of alluding to a little bit, and trying to get at this concept of affinity by building these AI models from your CRM data, right? And some of our clients will say, "Boy, I'm not sure we're ready for that. I'm not sure we have enough data to do that." And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're not right. And when they are right, I just still this idea of creating this actionable data set, to kind of keep borrowing Kristen's ideas, is like maybe you just do a quick RFM score to figure out like who do we look at first, and then like where someone then go dig into bigger details like Kristen was talking about, or maybe you build like a little kind of heuristic engagement score, right? Okay, like how many events have they gone to? Have they volunteered? And you just kind of give a point system to those and add it up, right? Because you can do that in Excel. It's pretty straightforward to do that, right? RFM similarly in Excel. Well, recency, frequency, magnitude, or monetary. I'm sorry. It's a way to sort. RFM is a way to sort your database from your best donors to your worst donors, where best doesn't necessarily mean how much they've given. It also kind of considers how frequently they give to you and how recently they've given to you, right? So it's just a way to rank your database, a very simple way to start, segmenting and prioritizing your database. Heuristic engagement score is kind of that next step of, let me actually just create a simple scoring system. I'm going to give you a point if you've been to an event in the last 12 months. I'm going to give you a point if you're a volunteer. I'm going to give you a point if we have 3 pieces of like contact information, email, phone numbers, etc. And you can add those up and then use that as a way to start differentiating. Then the last step is kind of what the bread and butter of my team, which is and kind of taking to the next step, which is building those predictive AI models from that CRM data, then generate those affinity scores so that you can start passing that information to figure out like who should we be thinking about talking to when it comes to major giving or mid-level giving or legacy giving, whatever it might be. So let's start somewhere. That's really the you got to start somewhere, start small, and then you grow.
Yeah, I love that. I'd love to take a step back and think about the beginning and think about collecting data. Does anyone have any tips on effective methods for collecting data from different sources within a nonprofit? Oh, Blake, I think you're talking. I think you're on mute.
I was talking to myself. I was like, yeah, that's a great question, but I can jump right in unless anyone else wants to kick it off. No. Yeah, I think one of the first things that a nonprofit can do is accurately categorize like who's coming to your site. So I know a lot of my recommendations are on like the performance advertising side. That really is kind of what I live and breathe. And I think a lot of organizations, especially as they've moved from, if they're utilizing Google Analytics or Universal Analytics to GA4, there's been this kind of loss of data and understanding like who's actually visiting their site. And that just naturally occurs as platforms evolve and change. But I think it's also important that nonprofits are putting things into place to make sure that they're able to capture that data and understand it. And so one of the things that we try to support our partners with is just accurately using like UTM parameters. So the ability to append URLs that they're using across different campaigns to accurately understand who's coming to their site and from which sources or channels. So firstly, it's understanding how UTM parameters work. If you're not familiar with them, kind of understanding the different components, whether that's the source parameter, the medium parameters, content parameters, term parameters. And then from there, once you actually have a pretty thorough understanding of how they work, creating a naming convention that's consistent across your organization. So if you have a team that's managing social media versus a team that's managing your email, you're able to accurately analyze and see that data in whatever analytics tool you're utilizing across the board. You're not having kind of mismatch and tracking. And then the last piece there is just really making sure that you're implementing those parameters across your campaigns, which if you're using a lot of different channels or a lot of different campaigns can be a lot of upfront work, but in the long run, it's going to be extremely valuable to your org.
Thanks, Blake.
Yeah, I'll build on that and to say, it's so easy, whether it's an organization with staff of thousands or 5, to still end up living in little silos. And so I think creating that culture of data-driven or data-informed strategy, connect with your other peers, start early, enrolling the right stakeholders in this process, figure out what richness of information already exists. And then, you may find that there aren't information gaps that you might have thought existed. So I think kind of start there, decide how much you can bite off, who those right folks are to enroll. And then the super exciting, sexy piece I always say is business rules and documentation. So making sure that there's that agreed language, some of what Blake talked about, so that there is real clarity, because it's so easy 10 years down the road to have incredibly muddy data if we don't have that initial understanding and agreement.
Great.
I think just taking it a little bit different direction. I love what Kristen and Blake said, absolutely. But if an organization is truly just getting started with data capture and they're wanting to capture from all or most stakeholders, so say volunteers, donors, and beneficiaries, would definitely say digital surveys are, the easiest way to go about that. But I want to emphasize what Blake and Kristen have said about, measurable, clear goals and objectives. And then what Kristen just said about, consistent language across your organization, having documentation in place. That is, it sounds simple. It may be, if you haven't really captured data, it might not sound all that important. But like she said, you get 10 years or maybe even just 2 years down the road, there's employee turnover, as there always is, and people don't even know what these terms mean, or they don't know what you're even attempting to measure because it doesn't align with KPIs or goals and objectives. So make sure that your goals and objectives are A, that you have some in place, B, that they're clear and measurable, and that you're using that consistent language that Kristen said. And then I would say, as far as getting data from multiple sources, multiple stakeholders, starting with a digital survey is a phenomenal place to start. If your team has the bandwidth to do focus groups or key informant interviews to get a little bit more story and qualitative or anecdotal data, that's incredibly powerful too. A lot of organizations shy away from that because it feels like the story data is going to be harder to analyze. But with AI and more tech tools that are rolling out, this is becoming easier and easier. So that would be my input, would be digital surveys and focus groups.
Yeah, I would just second business rules. So many times we'll see data that has, deceased in the address field, or solicit codes in the address fields. They're just mixed up. Having clear business rules and following them so that there's a consistency in how you can look at your data is really important.
That's amazing. So Kristen, you gave a really great example of what was it? Dogs drool, cats rule, and then the little pictures of cats. Love that. I think dogs rule. But does anyone else have any examples of how data can be used to personalize outreach and engagement efforts?
I mean, we are living in the ChatGPT world right now, right? So that's certainly one way to, certainly did someone say they started as a grant writer? Was that you, Lauren? Or I guess it was you, Amanda, right? So just a really quick story. I was at a AFP event in New Jersey and talking about AI and the idea of ChatGPT came up, and there was a grant writer in the audience who said, I'm not sure exactly why I'd want to use ChatGPT. And I felt bad for her because everybody in the room, or half the people in the room, kind of turned around and looked at her like, what, wait, you mean you're kind of falling behind the times if you're not using ChatGPT to at least start your grant requests? And I've seen other examples. I'm sure we all have, right, of ChatGPT helping us with, some of that communication. But the other things you can do is, I think, some of the things we've been talking about already, which is, building, again, my world is about building predictive models. Building models are other kinds of ways of segmenting people, and then building communications around that, building like the right message around how that segmentation kind of falls. Like kind of Kristen, and you were talking about that earlier as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen, with especially with ChatGPT, really effective ways for prompt generation of saying, "Hey, I'm writing an email to this particular demographic. Can you take what I've written here and make it more appealing?" And then just kind of bounce ideas off of it. Even with grant writing, can you cut my character count down by 500 characters, because grant funders tend to give you a limited space to draft your very long responses. All right. So thinking about emerging trends. So what emerging trends in data analytics should nonprofits be aware of, especially nonprofits on the call who are wanting to dig deeper into their analytics and effectiveness of such?
I'll speak to a trend that has, I would say, emerged. I don't think it's emerging, but we deal with a lot of wonderful nonprofits that are aware, but it's because they've lost funding, because they don't have enough impact data. And so they're aware of this emerging trend, but they're also a little bit behind pace-wise. And so they really have to catch up. And so for organizations on the call that aren't measuring data, I know that we have lots, I think about 150-ish on the call, or at least that registered. And so for those of you that have a lot of data, good for you. That's fantastic. For those that have a little bit, also fantastic. For those that don't have any, don't be afraid of that. But as all of us have said, definitely start capturing that data, because the trend that has emerged is that, not just granting organizations and family foundations, but at this point, individual donors are expecting, demanding, requesting impact data, and they want to know what's being done with their funds. Volunteers want to know what their time is really going toward. Employees too. Nonprofit employees want to know and need to be reminded of the impact that they're making. And so jump on the bandwagon, like it or not, leverage tech to really help you and your team. Don't be afraid of it. John was just talking about ChatGPT and all of the other AI tools that continue to roll out. So I know that there are learning curves, and I know that it can be frustrating. But for those that are hesitant on the call, maybe you feel like your team just can't handle it. There's so many tech tools that are free or discounted for nonprofits that you'll regret it in the long run if you don't just get started and capturing data again from the donor and volunteer side, but especially the programmatic side as well.
I would reinforce that. That's the emerging trend I see in expectations of data from the constituent side, is that I want not just the annual impact report, but more personalized, more timely. And that's where I think AI and other tech tools can really help us provide those impact outcome driven reporting that feels much more hyper-personalized to me and feels much more timely. I think what happens outside the nonprofit world has an impact on the nonprofit space. And there's just a growing expectation and an experience of something that is the immediate satisfaction, the immediate gratification. And our supporters are wanting something closer to that.
I might take a bit of a different perspective from my world. I think where the trend is from a AI, predictive modeling AI side, is automation, right? So currently, I think most people who are using predictive AI right now, most people, not all people, are doing it in a way that's kind of static. You have some data, you build some models, you get some scores, you kind of use them to find some new prospects, and you move on with life. But where the world is going is those nonprofits that actually have a steady stream of new people. It might be ticket buyers, right, to a zoo or an aquarium. It might be walkers to like American Cancer Society. It might be patients being discharged from a healthcare system. Imagine that all of that data comes into a cloud-based system that, using a variety of tools, says, these are the people that look interesting. Every week a list gets sent off to the prospect research team or to the gift officer and says, hey, take a look at these folks, because the data tell us these look interesting. And so there isn't a big delay, right? It's happening in a pretty quick fashion. Now, again, that's kind of, you need a certain kind of constituent world for that to be helpful, but that's really the trend that we're seeing.
I don't have a whole lot more to add. I agree with what everyone has said. I think one other piece, kind of circling back to some of the AI conversation, for those that haven't utilized or, leveraged AI to support their tracking and data analysis, there are a lot of really great resources out there that are free to help you both learn how to use these tools and become certified. Like top of mind, I know google.org and Google for Nonprofits has been putting out a lot of content around Gemini specifically, with their large language model and how to use it, some great use cases. OpenAI has put some out as well. So yeah, if you don't know where to get started, going through those certifications and trainings would be a really good place, in my opinion.
I want to build on that, Blake. For everyone else, which reports or resources each of you are keeping an eye on often about data and trends in general?
I think that's a great question, Amanda. As far as surveying and capturing data goes, ones that we really keep an eye on are Kobo Toolbox. They have a lot of free resources to nonprofits. Again, this is more specific to surveys and data capture. So again, most of their stuff is free to nonprofits. They continue to roll out new tools, lots of AI being incorporated, and they have offline capabilities. So if any of the nonprofits here function in remote areas or on an international basis where you don't have great Wi-Fi connectivity, Kobo Toolbox has offline versions of their surveys, which can be very helpful depending on what kind of work you do. For larger organizations that have the budget and the personnel, Salesforce is another one that has remarkable data analytics, and Tableau along with that. So it sort of depends on where you're at and what you're looking for. And then somewhere in the middle there, again, more for the survey data capture side, is SurveyMonkey, and that can integrate with a lot of existing softwares. It can get expensive, but those are some that can be very helpful to the nonprofits that we work with when they're looking at capturing data and wanting some tech components to help them analyze it.
I love that. I've dropped a couple of links in the chat just in case, and I'll try to pull out a couple more nuggets from you all.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
Yeah, the two that I love, the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, which I think a lot of us track and are aware of. It looks at donors and retention and some of the movement that happens on a quarterly basis. But there's also a Growth in Giving initiative that allows you to upload your data and receive pretty quick, like very quick turnaround on some of those top level metrics. So there's some really quick, very actionable data that can come from that. And that's a great place, especially for small nonprofits to start if you don't have those big budgets that Laura was talking about. Or just a tool that's as big as Salesforce might not make sense for you quite yet. To look at some really bare data, and it can allow you to then get that report back.
Great.
A little different perspectives. We tend to look at, in terms of what's going on, like what the trends are, we tend to look outside the fundraising world. So in our world, we might look at, what's McKinsey doing, or what's Boston Consulting Group doing, or, what are the kind of the high end folks doing? Just so we can get a sense of because they're going to typically push the envelope. They have clients who can pay a lot of money for these things. So what are they doing now, and will that trickle down to the rest of us, in a year or two? So looking, you don't have to look at McKinsey or Boston Consulting or any of those, but what are people doing, outside of fundraising to generate leads and take advantage of those leads, right? That's, I think, can be a helpful way to think about how to be innovative in the fundraising world.
I think that's such a great point, John. Sometimes you don't have to recreate the wheel or reinvent the wheel. I think a little microcosm of that, specifically in fundraising, a Community Boost, as we approach year end for advertising specifically, we're often very much looking at the Giving Tuesday reports that go out, the M&R benchmark reports. Those specifically are looking at channels that have been effective for nonprofits in fundraising typically. I mean, there's other aspects too and components like social media growth and email list development and nurturing and things like that. But generally, it's really helpful for us to kind of look at those reports as some of the biggest nonprofits are sharing their data around like what was effective for them. And then internally, we actually, since not everyone is an Oxfam or that of that size, we look at our own internal clients, and every year we analyze our year-end data and kind of share those insights with the sector at large, and then the rest of our clients of what our recommendations for channels will be for Giving Tuesday and year end. So we put out what we call an acceleration report every year as well. Shameless plug. But that can be really helpful for like that smaller nonprofit kind of getting started.
I love that. And just another plug. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to plop them in the Q&A. I'm not seeing any right now. I'll ask one. And this is something that, I get, in my consulting calls with folks in and outside of TGB, I get asked sometimes, and I would love to hear your responses. So how do you see the role of data analytics evolving in the nonprofit sector over the next decade? I know we talked in the past about nomenclature in the, past, but let's talk about the next.
I'll start that off with one of the current challenges I think we're experiencing, and I anticipate again data analytics evolving to help us solve for how do we measure, capture, think about, evaluate, if we will, donors and people who participate and give outside of how we have always been able to traditionally capture and report on donating, giving hours. So social platforms, just all of these other ways through which people are deeply philanthropic. Our current big picture reporting isn't able to capture that full picture of philanthropic inclination and philanthropy and what's happening in the United States. And so I think data analytics, what we look at, figuring out how to track and report on that bigger picture that includes more recent forms and trends in giving. I think we're going to be seeing data analytics help us solve for and capture that information and report out on that as well.
That's a great insight.
I completely agree with what Kristen said, and I think we all are very aware that technology is only going to, speed things up and provide more and more information. And so I think that will be the same in the nonprofit sector as it is elsewhere. I think what could happen and what I hope happens is that frees up more and more nonprofit employees, that their time is more available because technology, AI is, doing some of their jobs for them. And that ideally those individuals can then connect with people, again, whether that's volunteers, donors, constituents or beneficiaries, the people that you serve. So hopefully leveraging tech, leveraging AI to free up your internal team's time. Because as we see with whether it's social media or, inboxes being flooded, people don't want to read anymore. People are inundated with information. They just want to genuinely connect. So to get a little bit away from the digital side, like I absolutely leverage data, leverage digital tech, but then free up your team's time with those tools so that they can go connect with the people, the stakeholders that are part of your organization. And hopefully there is deeper connection. Hopefully there is more personalization from the added information that our tech tools are providing for us.
Fabulous.
And to kind of follow up on that, I mean, we're generating all this data. And one of the things I hear from our clients is, well, we have our CRM and we have digital and we have, volunteer and we have ticket data, and it's like in 5 different systems. So, right, if we generate more data and bring on more tools that bring more data, I think the real challenge we really need to kind of address is how do we effectively integrate all that data together in a way that somebody can use and make actionable. And we are expert on my team, not me necessarily, but my team is like in doing all these like database joins to pull all that stuff together, which is we need to do that to do our work, but that doesn't help our clients. Like how do we integrate all this stuff together in a way? I think Salesforce has some solutions along those lines. But again, we're seeing like there are some tools we're starting to see. Civis is a tool that we've seen recently that allows or a platform to kind of integrate all these different data sources together, so you can actually get some good views across these different systems. But it's not, even Civis is not for the faint of heart. And somebody still needs to understand, like, what is a SQL query? Like, and how would you actually use that? And so I think there's going to be a need for tech people, data nerds, but make sure that what they're focused on is giving you some good views of this integration. And again, back to Kristen's point, giving some things that are actionable, giving you some data that's actionable.
Great.
I think what everyone has said has really resonated. I think going back to Lauren's point a bit, I really hope that with the increase and growth of AI and some of these tools that are available, it's going to be easier for nonprofit leaders to tell the story of their data. They're not going to have to necessarily rely on consultants. Like everyone can become an expert because those data points are just available and kind of shared. I know even in like tools like Google Analytics or Google Ads, there's now just these pop-ups that kind of share, hey, here's a little blip, here's a little insight of what's happened over the course of the last week or 2 weeks. And that's growing. And I'm hoping that over time, more and more of that type of stuff becomes available across all platforms and tools. So like Lauren said, nonprofit leaders can tell that story quickly, more easily, and then also make time to be boots on the ground with like those supporters and then the work that they actually do day to day.
That's amazing. Okay, last chance for questions. I'm not seeing any in the Q&A right now. All right. Well, this has been incredibly insightful. I'm grateful for each and every one of you for sharing not only your stories, your experience, but your really impactful insights. And I hope all of our attendees gathered some great knowledge from you all. Again, we'll be sending a follow-up email with the recording and other resources. But again, I wanted to thank all of the panelists for your participation and attendees for coming today.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks for having us. Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.